Rancher took her in after she said, "If you don't take me, I won't last the night." The ranch had always been quiet at night. Wide open land, low hills in the distance, and the sound of wind moving through dry grass were all the rancher was used to. He lived alone, far from the nearest town, and that was how he liked it. People rarely came this way unless they were lost, and even then, they usually passed by before dark. That night, however, felt different from the start. The sky had turned heavy and dark earlier than usual. Thick clouds rolled in, covering the stars, and the air felt cold and restless. The rancher had just finished feeding the animals and was heading back to the house when he noticed something strange near the old wooden gate at the edge of his land. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a stray horse or a deer caught in the fence line. He stopped and squinted into the darkness. Then he saw her. She was standing still, holding on to the gate, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her clothes were dirty and torn in places, and her hair was wet and tangled, hanging loosely around her face. She looked small against the wide land, almost swallowed by the night. For a moment the rancher wondered if he was imagining things. No one ever came here this late. He took a cautious step closer. Years of living alone had taught him to be careful. "Hey," he called out, keeping his voice firm but calm. "You lost?" Her face was pale, and her eyes were filled with fear and exhaustion. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a shaky breath, as if speaking required more strength than she had left. "Please," she said finally, her voice barely louder than the wind, "I need help." The rancher felt a tight knot form in his chest. He didn't like surprises, especially not ones that showed up at his gate after dark. Still, he could see that she was in bad shape. She was shivering, her hands trembling as they gripped the wood. "What happened to you?" he asked, staying a few steps away. She shook her head. "I can't explain everything, not now." Her eyes moved past him, scanning the darkness behind the ranch as if she expected someone to appear at any second. That was when she said the words that changed everything. "If you don't take me in," she whispered, her voice breaking, "I won't last the night." The rancher had heard many things in his life, but never that. He stood there, silent, trying to understand what he was hearing. He looked around the land. Miles of empty fields, no lights, no neighbors close enough to hear a call for help. Whatever had brought her here, it was serious. He hesitated. Taking a stranger into his home went against every rule he had made for himself. He didn't know who she was, where she came from, or what kind of trouble might follow her, but when he looked at her again, he didn't see danger. He saw someone who had reached the very end of her strength. "You can come inside," he said at last, "but slow and easy, all right?" Her shoulders dropped slightly, as if a heavy weight had just been lifted. She nodded and took a careful step forward. The rancher noticed she was limping. Every movement looked painful, but she tried not to show it. As they walked toward the house, the wind picked up and the first drops of rain began to fall. The rancher quickened his pace, glancing back at her to make sure she was keeping up. She was breathing hard now, her steps uneven. Inside the house, the warmth hit them immediately. The rancher turned on the lights, and the room filled with a soft yellow glow. The woman flinched slightly, shielding her eyes as if she wasn't used to light anymore. "Sit," he said, pointing to a chair near the table. "You're safe for now." She lowered herself into the chair, letting out a long breath she seemed to have been holding for hours. Her hands rested in her lap, still shaking. The rancher poured her a glass of water and set it in front of her. "Drink slowly." She obeyed, taking small sips, as if afraid the water might disappear if she rushed. When she finished, she looked up at him for the first time without panic in her eyes. Instead, there was deep tiredness. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded but didn't smile. His mind was racing. He noticed small details now. The marks on her arms that looked like she'd fallen more than once. The way she stiffened at every sound outside. The way she kept glancing at the door. "You hungry?" he asked. "I haven't eaten since yesterday." While he prepared something simple, he kept an eye on her. He didn't ask more questions yet. He could tell she wasn't ready, and pushing her would only make things worse. When he placed the food in front of her, she hesitated, then began to eat slowly, as if unsure whether she truly had permission. As the storm grew louder outside, the house felt like a small island of safety. The woman finished her meal and leaned back slightly, closing her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they were filled with emotion. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. "I just kept walking. I didn't even know this place existed." The rancher leaned against the counter. "You don't have to tell me everything tonight," he said. "Get some rest first." He showed her a small spare room at the back of the house. It was simple, just a bed, a blanket, and a lamp. But to her, it looked like the safest place in the world. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding the blanket tightly. As the rancher turned to leave, she spoke again, her voice soft but serious. "I don't know how to repay you." He paused at the door. "You don't have to," he replied. "Just get through the night." He closed the door gently and walked back down the hallway. As he sat in his chair, listening to the rain hit the roof, he realized something important. Whatever her story was, it had already entered his life. The quiet ranch was no longer just his, and the night that began like any other had become the start of something neither of them could have planned. The night moved slowly after she went into the small room. The rancher sat alone in the living area, listening to the storm outside. Rain hit the roof in a steady rhythm, and the wind pushed against the walls as if testing how strong the house really was. He kept his eyes on the hallway, half expecting her to step out again, frightened or unsure. But the door stayed closed. He told himself he had done the right thing. Still, his mind would not rest. He had lived alone for years, trusting routine and silence. Now there was a stranger sleeping under his roof, and he knew almost nothing about her. Every sound made him alert. The creak of the floor, the whistle of the wind, even his own breathing. After some time, he stood up and quietly walked toward her door. He didn't knock. He only paused, listening. From inside, he could hear slow, uneven breathing. She was asleep, but not deeply. It was the kind of sleep that came from pure exhaustion, the kind that could break at any moment. He returned to his chair and sat down again. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Midnight came and went. Outside, the storm began to calm, but the heavy clouds remained, keeping the land dark and closed in. Near morning, he heard movement. Soft footsteps in the hallway. He looked up as she appeared, standing uncertainly near the doorframe. She was holding the blanket around her shoulders, her face pale in the low light. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," he replied, though he hadn't slept at all. "You all right?" I couldn't stay asleep." He understood that feeling too well. "Coffee?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, please." They sat at the small table, steam rising from the cups between them. For a while, neither spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable, just careful. The rancher noticed how she kept both hands wrapped tightly around the mug, as if warmth alone was holding her together. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. I didn't expect you to help me," he shrugged. "I didn't expect anyone at my gate." A small, tired smile crossed her face, then faded just as quickly. "I was running out of time," she said. He didn't ask what she meant. Instead, he asked, "Do you know where you are?" She shook her head. "No, I only saw the fence in the light. I followed it." "That fence goes on for miles," he said. "You must have been walking a long time." "I stopped counting after that." The rancher leaned back in his chair. The more she spoke, the clearer it became that this was not just bad luck or poor planning. She had been pushed to the edge of her strength. As daylight slowly filled the room, he could see her more clearly. There were small marks on her hands, dried mud on her shoes, and deep shadows under her eyes. She looked older than she probably was, like life had rushed her through too much too fast. "You don't have to explain anything you don't want to," he said. "But if there's danger, I should know." When she looked up, her eyes were wet but steady. "I'm not dangerous," she said quickly. "I swear, I'm just trying to get away." "Away from what?" he asked gently. She swallowed. "A place where I stopped feeling safe." That was all she said, but it was enough. The rancher nodded. He didn't push further. He knew some stories needed time to breathe before they could be told. The rest of the morning passed slowly. He showed her where the bathroom was, gave her clean towels, and let her take a long shower. While she was gone, he cleaned the kitchen and checked the locks on the doors and windows, not because he feared her, but because he sensed fear was still following her. When she came back, she looked slightly better. Cleaner, steadier, but still fragile. She wore an old shirt he had given her, sleeves too long for her arms. "Thank you," she said again, "for everything." "You've said that already," he replied. "You don't owe me anything." The rain had washed the land clean. The air smelled fresh and sunlight touched the fields gently. She stood still for a moment, taking it all in, like someone seeing open space for the first time. "It's quiet," she said. "That's why I live here," he answered. As the day went on, she helped where she could. She insisted on washing dishes, sweeping the floor, and organizing things that didn't need organizing. The rancher noticed it wasn't about being useful. It was about staying busy, keeping her mind from wandering back to whatever she had escaped. Car passed on the distant road in the afternoon. The sound was faint, but it made her freeze. Her body tensed, her eyes sharp with worry. The rancher noticed immediately. "No one comes here," he said calmly, "especially not without a reason." She nodded, but the tension didn't fully leave her shoulders. By evening, clouds returned, though no rain followed. They ate dinner quietly. This time, she finished her meal without hesitation. That small change didn't escape his notice. Later, as the sun sank behind the hills, she finally spoke again. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said. "I'll leave as soon as I can." He looked at her carefully. "You don't look ready to go anywhere." "I can't stay," she replied quickly. "I don't want to bring my problems into your life." He considered her words. "Problems don't ask for permission," he said. "They show up when they want." She let out a breath she had been holding. "I don't even know what comes next." "That's all right," he said. "You don't have to know tonight." As darkness settled over the ranch once more, the house felt different than it had the night before. Still quiet, but no longer empty. She returned to the spare room, this time without hesitation. Before closing the door, she turned back. "I feel safe here," she said softly. "For the first time in a long while." The rancher nodded, feeling a strange weight in his chest. He knew that safety was fragile. He also knew that whatever she was running from hadn't simply disappeared. But for now, the night was calm, and the ranch held its silence like a promise. As he sat back in his chair, watching shadows move across the walls, he understood something clearly. Taking her in had been more than a single act of kindness. It was the beginning of a responsibility he hadn't planned for, one that would test his quiet life in ways he couldn't yet see. Morning arrived gently, with soft light slipping through the windows and spreading across the wooden floor. The rancher was already awake, moving quietly around the kitchen. He had fallen asleep late, his thoughts heavy, but habit pulled him out of bed early. Outside, the animals stirred, and the land slowly came back to life. She came out of the room a little later than the day before. Her steps were still careful, but there was less fear in her eyes now. She looked more rested, though the weight she carried had not disappeared. She paused when she saw him, as if unsure whether to speak first. "Good morning," he said, keeping his tone calm. "Morning," she replied. "I hope I didn't sleep too long." "You needed it." She nodded and sat at the table. As she wrapped her hands around the warm cup he placed in front of her, she took a deep breath. The quiet of the house felt different now. It no longer pressed in on her. Instead, it felt like space, room to think, room to breathe. For a while, they talked about small things, the weather, the land. How long he had lived on the ranch, he answered simply, without sharing too much. He noticed that she listened closely, as if ordinary details helped her feel normal again. After breakfast, she followed him outside. The sun was higher now, lighting up the fields and hills. She stopped again, looking around, her eyes taking in the wide space. "It still feels unreal," she said, "like I might wake up and be back where I was." "You're here," he said. "That's real enough. I owe you the truth." He didn't answer right away. He waited, letting her set the pace. "I didn't come here by accident," she said. "I was running. Not just from a place, but from a life that stopped making sense." He stayed silent, giving her room. "I trusted the wrong people," she continued. "I thought doing what they asked would fix things. Instead, it made everything worse." Her voice didn't shake, but her hands did. She pressed them together as if trying to hold herself steady. "I didn't have anyone left," she said. "No one who would listen. No one who would help." The rancher watched her carefully. He could hear the truth in her voice, not in details, but in the way she spoke, slow, measured, like someone afraid of saying too much at once. "So you walked," he said. "Yes," she replied. "I walked until my legs barely worked. I didn't care where I ended up. I just knew I couldn't stay." They stood there for a long moment, the wind moving gently through the grass around them. "You're safe here," he said again. "For now." She looked at him, her eyes full. "That means more than you know." As the day went on, she helped him with small tasks around the ranch. Nothing heavy, just feeding animals, carrying light things, holding gates open. He noticed how focused she became when she worked, as if each task pulled her further into the present moment. Around midday, a distant sound reached them, the low hum of a vehicle far off on the road. She stiffened instantly. Her shoulders tensed and her eyes darted toward the sound. "It's just someone passing by," he said calmly. She nodded, but her breath came faster. "I know. Sounds like that make my mind race." He understood. "If anything worries you," he said, "tell me." "You trust me that much?" He considered his answer. "I trust what I see," he said. and I see someone trying to survive. That afternoon, clouds rolled in again, though they stayed high. The light dimmed slightly, and the air grew cooler. They went back inside, and she sat at the table staring at her hands. "There's something else," she said quietly. He looked up. "Go on. I didn't tell you my name," she said. "Not because I wanted to hide from you. I just needed time." "That's all right," he replied. She took a breath. "My name is Sarah." He nodded. "All right, Sarah." Her eyes filled, and she quickly wiped them away. "I haven't heard it said kindly in a long time," she admitted. The rancher felt a tightness in his chest, but didn't show it. "You're welcome here, Sarah." Later that evening, as they sat quietly, she finally shared more. Not every detail, but enough to understand the shape of her past. She spoke of promises that were broken, of being pushed into corners she didn't see coming, of fear that grew slowly until it felt normal. "I kept telling myself things would get better," she said, "that if I just waited, something would change." "But it didn't," he said. "No," she replied. "I had to change it myself, even if it meant walking into the dark." Outside, the sky deepened into night. The rancher checked the doors and windows again, more carefully this time, not because he expected trouble, but because he knew peace often needed protecting. That night, a set of headlights appeared briefly on the far road, barely visible through the trees. The rancher noticed them. So did Sarah. She froze, her body tense. "They're not stopping," he said quietly after a moment. "See? Just passing through." The lights disappeared, and she slowly relaxed. "I hate feeling like this," she said, "like I'm always waiting for something bad to happen." "That feeling fades," he said. "Not all at once. But it does." She looked at him. "How do you know?" "Because I've had my own reasons to run once," he replied. She didn't ask more. She didn't need to. When it was time to rest, she went to the spare room again. This time she paused at the door. "I don't know how long I'll need," she said, "but I won't forget what you've done." He nodded. "One day at a time," he said. "That's enough." After she closed the door, the rancher sat alone, listening to the quiet settle around him. He realized something important. The truth she had shared was only part of the story. Whatever followed her was still out there, somewhere beyond the fields and fences. But he also knew this. She was no longer alone. The next day did not begin as calmly as the others. The morning air felt heavier, and the quiet that once felt peaceful now carried a sense of warning. The rancher noticed it the moment he stepped outside. The animals were restless, moving more than usual, as if they sensed something before he did. Sarah came out a few minutes later. She paused on the porch, her eyes scanning the open land. Her body stiffened. "Something feels off," she said quietly. He didn't dismiss her feeling. Instead, he looked around carefully. The road in the distance was empty, but there were faint marks in the dirt near the fence, fresh tire tracks that hadn't been there the day before. "You expecting someone?" he asked, already knowing the answer. She shook her head slowly. "No, but I was afraid this would happen." He only said, "Go inside." She obeyed without argument. Inside the house, she sat near the window, watching the land with nervous eyes. The rancher checked the doors again and made sure everything was secure. He didn't panic, but he stayed alert. A few hours passed with no sign of trouble. The sun climbed higher and the quiet returned, though it felt fragile now, like thin glass. The rancher went back outside to tend to his work, but he stayed closer to the house than usual. Then, around midday, a vehicle appeared on the far road. It slowed as it passed the ranch. Too slow. Sarah saw it from the window and froze. Her breath caught, and her hands began to shake. "That's them," she whispered. "I don't know how, but that's them." "Are they stopping?" They both watched. The vehicle slowed further, then continued down the road. It disappeared behind a rise in the land. Sarah didn't relax. "They won't just leave," she said. "They never do." He could see the fear was not imagined. It came from experience. They don't know you're here for sure," he said. "And even if they did, this is my land." "I didn't mean to drag you into this." "You didn't," he said firmly. "You came looking for help." "That's not a crime." The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Every distant sound made Sarah tense. The rancher tried to keep things normal, but he could feel the tension too. He realized then that this was the moment he had been trying not to think about. The past had finally caught up. As evening approached, the same vehicle returned. This time it stopped near the gate. The rancher stepped forward, positioning himself between the house and the road. He didn't move aggressively. He simply stood his ground. Two people stepped out. They didn't come closer, but their presence alone changed the air. Sarah watched from inside, her heart racing. One of them called out, asking questions that sounded harmless on the surface. Had he seen anyone passing through? Had anyone asked for help? The rancher answered calmly and honestly without giving anything away. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show fear. After a long moment, the people got back into their vehicle. The engine started, and the car drove away, kicking up dust as it left. Sarah didn't move for a long time after that. When she finally stepped outside, her legs felt weak. "They'll be back," she said. "Maybe not today, but they don't give up easily." Then we prepare. That night they talked more openly than before. Sarah shared more details, not names, not exact places, but enough to explain why she had been so afraid. She had been pushed into a situation she couldn't escape easily. When she finally tried to leave, she was told she couldn't. That was when she ran. "I thought if I kept moving, they'd lose me," she said. "I didn't think about where I was going. I just needed distance." "You did the right thing," he said. "Staying would have broken you." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't look away this time. "I didn't think anyone would stand up for me." He looked at her steadily. "Everyone deserves someone who will." That night, neither of them slept much. The rancher stayed near the window, watching the land. Sarah stayed in her room, listening to every sound. The house felt smaller now, but also stronger, like a shelter built to withstand a storm. The next day passed quietly, but the tension remained. The rancher knew he couldn't keep her hidden forever. He also knew she couldn't keep running. "We'll figure out a way forward," he told her. "But not by panic. Step by step." "I'm tired of running." By evening, the sky turned red and gold. The land looked peaceful again, almost too peaceful. The rancher watched the horizon, knowing that peace like this never lasted forever. When darkness fell, the ranch lights stayed on. Inside, Sarah sat at the table, calmer now, but still alert. "No matter what happens," she said quietly, "I won't forget this." "You didn't have to help me." He looked at her. "Sometimes doing nothing is worse than taking a risk." Outside, the night stretched wide and silent. Whatever was coming hadn't arrived yet, but both of them knew it was close. The night passed without trouble, but neither of them felt relief when morning came. Instead, there was a quiet understanding between them that things could not stay the same. Hiding and waiting were not solutions. Whatever Sarah had escaped from would always remain close, unless she chose a different path forward. The rancher woke early, as always. He stood on the porch, looking out over the land as the sun slowly rose. The fields glowed softly, and the animals moved calmly again. From the outside, everything looked normal, peaceful. But inside the house, something had changed. Sarah joined him a few minutes later. She wrapped her arms around herself, breathing in the cool morning air. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were clearer than before. "I've been thinking all night," she said. "So have I," he replied. She looked out at the open land. "I can't keep running. I don't want to live in fear anymore." He nodded. "That's not living. That's surviving." She turned to him. "I need help. Real help. Not just hiding." He had expected those words. "Then we do this the right way," he said calmly. "No rush. No panic." They sat at the table and talked through everything slowly. Not just what had happened, but what came next. He helped her think clearly, step by step, instead of letting fear decide for her. She shared what she felt safe sharing, and for the first time, she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight alone. Later that day, he drove her into town. It was a small place, quiet and slow, where people still looked each other in the eye. Sarah was nervous the entire drive, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, but she stayed in the seat. She didn't ask to turn back. "That alone is strength," the rancher told her. In town, they spoke to people who knew how to listen, people whose job it was to help, not judge. Sarah spoke softly at first, but as the words came out, something inside her began to loosen. She wasn't alone anymore. Story mattered. When they returned to the ranch that evening, Sarah looked different. Still tired, still healing, but lighter somehow. "Thank you for not giving up on me," she said quietly. He shook his head. "You didn't give up on yourself. I just stood nearby." The days that followed were calmer. No strange vehicles. No unexpected visitors. Just quiet mornings and steady routines. Sarah stayed on the ranch a little longer, not as someone hiding, but as someone resting and rebuilding. She helped more now, not out of fear, but choice. She laughed sometimes, softly at first, then more freely. The sound surprised both of them. One afternoon, as they watched the sunset, she spoke again. I don't know where I'll go next, but I know I won't go backward. That's enough, he said. The rest comes in time. Not because she was being pushed out, but because she was ready to move forward. She stood on the porch looking out at the land one last time. This place saved me, she said. He corrected her gently. You saved yourself. This place just gave you room to breathe. They didn't hug. They didn't need to. Some connections go deeper than gestures. As she walked away, the rancher felt the quiet return, but it no longer felt empty. It felt full of meaning. He went back to his routines, feeding animals, fixing fences, watching the land change with the seasons. Life returned to its steady rhythm. But he was not the same man who had once lived only for silence. Sometimes late at night he thought about that stormy evening and the woman at his gate, about how one choice, made in a moment of compassion, had changed 2 lives. And somewhere beyond the ranch, Sarah moved forward with her life, stronger, safer, and no longer alone. The night she said she wouldn't last had ended long ago.